All right, we're on. The basic speech format is the name I got on this thing, and it's an informative outline is what this is. Not a persuasive outline, it's an informative outline. I'll talk a little bit about the persuasive as well, but this will give you, there's a lot of similarities between the two, and this will give you the basic idea of what it looks like. I got this format from that speech teacher I mentioned earlier, who was kind of my hero, Jan Larson, down at USD, later Jan Larson Lewis. She just gave me a lot of good ideas, and I made notes on them, not with the idea that I was going to be a speech teacher, but that when I did a presentation, I wanted to do certain things. And so she had given me a starting point, and then I added to them as I took some other classes and so on. And anyway, then I wound up, I'm going to use this as an outline, guide to the outline, and I've had a number of students over the years tell me that they have laminated this paper version of it, and you can print one off and keep it, or just have it on your computer, of course. And other presentations, and even written presentations, it had a lot of good ideas in it, so they would refer to them. So what I have here basically is a speech about how to give a speech. I'm going to inform you how to go about writing your speech. So that leads to one confusing thing that I always have to clear up, and I will. So let me just start at the top. The general purpose is to inform. And by the way, you'll see how I'm moving my cursor around on this, as opposed to general purpose to inform. When you use this for a visual aid, don't turn your back on your audience, especially if you got a bald head like I do, it blinds them from the light. But use your cursor with your mouse and just ignore that. So the general purpose of this speech is to inform. It's an informative speech. This is a reminder to you. It's not words you're going to say in the speech. It's a reminder to you. I'm informing, not persuading. I don't want to use words like should. You should do this. You should do that. I'm just going to give this information to the audience. Everything on your outline when you write it that's in boldface, like general purpose, that will be in boldface, and it has to be there just like that, exactly like that. The inform part, that's what you'll add, to inform or to persuade or to entertain, whatever the purpose is. And that's not in boldface. Now in practice, because we have, no, this doesn't stay where you want it here with this slant, does it? In practice, you are going to go take this outline that I send you when you do your informative speech and just replace with your own words. Now, the informative, you won't have to replace anything because it's there. However, on the specific purpose, again, leave the boldface, specific purpose, just like it is. And then where it says to inform my audience about, that's okay. The rest of it, though, this part, that's going to change. To inform my audience about the difference between kindergarten today and kindergarten 30 years ago, or whatever that might be, that will be your words. Okay. So now that's specifically, I'm not just going to inform them, I'm going to inform them about kindergarten changes over the years, for instance. Here where you see the word introduction, again, that's boldface, so that stays right there just like that, and that's our label. And there's three parts to the speech, the introduction being the first part of the speech, obviously. And in the introduction has four main elements to it. It has an attention step, a care step, a credibility step, and a central idea / preview step. So going back up to the attention step is the first thing that you're going to say is your attention step. That's where your presentation begins to the audience. And so I'm not going to claim this as being the best outline ever, because I made some compromises here. I wanted to get it all so it fit on two sides of one piece of paper, so a single piece of paper would hold it. So it's not, I didn't write it as if it was actually going to be my speech, but it does look like your outline will look, and that's going to be important for getting your grade. And here's what I have for my attention step, though, should get your attention. Nearly half of your final grade will depend on your ability to write an effective outline. So probably the audience, being the audience is a speech class, probably, oh, better listen to this. A lot of my grade is going to depend on this. So you always start out with an attention step. There's an old story about someone staying on a farm, and back in the old days when they were still using mules, and he sees the farmer hitch up a mule to a plow, and then the farmer goes around in front of the mule with a 2x4 and belts him over the head with a 2x4. Now, don't report me to the Humane Society, this is just a speech deal here. And he says to the farmer, he says, why did you hit that mule over the head? He says, first, and then the farmer goes around and goes, giddy up. And he says, why did you hit him with the 2x4 first? You have to get the mule's attention. And you have to get the audience's attention. Because like I said earlier, thinking about your kids, what they're doing at home and so on, you're looking out the window, you're looking around, you need to get their attention. And I'm going to give you some ideas about how to get their attention later on, but you got to pull them out of their little world and into yours. And it's an attention step. You might ask a question or tell a joke or so on, but I'll get to more on that later. So the attention step will look like this. Attention step itself will be out in the margin, pulled off to the side, and again, you won't have to build that, just leave it alone and get down into here where it says, and then these will be your words. Now you got their attention. Oh, half my grade, huh? Well, but why do I really care? And there's several ways I could have done this better, but like I said, I'm making it short. You can use this outline format to prepare for presentation in other situations as well. So once you get their attention, now why do they care about this topic? Why does it matter to them? And so like with the kindergarten thing, just off the top of my head, they all have children of their own, a couple years here. Lex is going to have kids starting kindergarten, so what goes on in kindergarten these days and that sort of thing. But you have to explain to the audience why they should care. You can't just assume that they care because you do. So tell the audience why they care. That my speech teacher that I talked about earlier, in my first college career in the 60s, early 60s that is, and there's a difference between the early 60s and the late 60s, a lot of difference. But anyway, language was pretty formal. We called our teachers Mr. or Mrs. and all that. Now I'm Pete. So things changed a lot. Anyway, when she talked about that care step, she used some language that's stronger than I'll use. But I try not to swear. Every now and then I get excited and one pops out. But I try not to swear, but I'm going to in this example because I want it to stick in your head. And so she basically said, you have to tell the audience why they give a shit. Otherwise they tune out. They're done listening to you if there's no reason to care. If I'm going to tell you about corn production in Afghanistan and I have no interest in Afghanistan as an audience member at all, if I find out it has something to do with our troops coming home, then I care, perhaps. So you have to tell the audience why they care. And then you got them plugged in. Now that they care, the credibility step. Evaluating over 1,000 speeches convinced me that this format produces effective speeches. So I just told you I have some experience in the matter. That's credibility. That's what credibility means. I'm credible. I'm believable. There's a reason to listen to me. I care about your topic, but you don't know what you're talking about. So why should I continue to listen to you even though I care about the topic? If Tom Cruise wants to tell me how I can go from being a scrawny little guy like this to a famous movie star, I'll listen. Well, it starts with plastic surgery. No. Anyway, whatever Tom did to become this big movie star, I'm interested. If he wants to tell me about psychiatry and why Brooks shouldn't be taking antidepressants when she's got postpartum depression, I'm not interested, Tom. You don't have any credibility there with me. The psychiatrists have the credibility. And women have the credibility. On top of that, Tom, you don't know anything about this. Shut up. What do you know? So he doesn't have credibility in that area, but he has it in the area of acting because he's a famous actor and has won a lot of awards and stuff like that. A lot of people have seen his movies. So you have to tell the people, have to get their attention, have to tell them why they care so they'll continue to pay attention, and you have to tell them why you're a believable source of this information you're about to give so they'll continue again to give you their attention. The central idea preview step, basically, with your informative and persuasive speech, is just going to list the main points, one phrase at a time. And what you're going to see here is writing a body, an introduction, and a conclusion Those are the main points of this particular speech. Each with their own focus is the key to creating an effective speech. Now, notice the order here. Remember I said up here, introduction comes first. Down here, I have writing a body first. Why is that? Why don't I have the introduction first?
Because you can get a better introduction based on what you come up with for your body.
Nice.
Right. Yeah, to amplify that soft voice, you have a better introduction if you know what you're going to introduce. If I'm a master of ceremonies and I'm introduced 3 speakers and I've never heard of them before, I don't have much to say yet. I need to know something about them.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll write the body, and then based on that body, once I get done with that, how do I introduce this? Now you'll have some ideas right off the bat, maybe about how to get their attention and so on, but definitely you can't write the preview step until you know what you're going to preview. So it's the central idea and a slash preview step, both those ideas here. And then once I have said that, writing a body, introduction, and conclusion, each with their own focus, I'm going to transition from that into the body of the speech. Now if you watch the weatherman on TV and he's talking with the national map there behind him, they'll say it's raining heavily in Seattle tonight and snowdrifts are 10 foot deep. You're going to go, what? Huh? How'd this happen? How do we go from rain to snow? What he's going to say is, raining heavily in Seattle, the streets are flooded and all that. Meanwhile, out in the Central Plains, we got 10 feet of snow. Well, that meanwhile is a transition. It transitions you from Washington State on the coast of the Pacific Ocean to the plains of South Dakota and North Dakota where it's snowing. So you have to take your body, your audience, into the body of the speech by letting them know that I'm moving here. And typically that's just something like, first, I'm going to tell you about such and such. In this case, since you'll write the body first, let's look at it first. Now they know I'm gone from previewing the speech into actually talking about the body of it. Now here again we have labels. Body, that's centered because there's several things here, but the body, and that'll stay as it is. And then speech order is also boldface, and that'll stay as it is. But in between, this word chronological is the type of speech order, and that's all in your first chapter that you read for the class. Chapter 5, they talked about different, topical and chronological and spatial, that sort of thing. Why is this chronological? Why do I call this chronological? Just looking at your transition there, for instance.
Because of time.
It's time, right? First, I'm going to do this. Second, we're going to do this. Third, we're going to do that. So yeah, it's chronological because it's about time. So be sure and change that. Most of them won't be. Typically with your informative, it's going to be topical. You're going to have 3 different subtopics under the big idea about diabetes. You'll have a topic of what causes it and how you treat it and what the outcome is, for instance, and so it'll be topical. Okay, the body of the speech tells them, this is the main point now, main point 1, tells them what you want to tell the audience in detail. So, the body amounts to, and now here's some ideas about the body that I got from my speech teacher that I'm telling you about. The body winds up being 75 to 85% of the total length of the speech. You'll spend a little bit of time on the introduction and even a little bit less time on the conclusion. The main reason you spend less time on the conclusion is because you don't have an attention step and a care step and a credibility step. That kind of accounts for the extra time on the introduction. But the central idea preview step is going to be very similar when you get to the end with your conclusion, with your review of it. Because remember, in a speech you tell them 3 times. You tell your audience what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them, and you're still going to hope is that kind of focused. So I've been more behind the podium with this laptop on this one.
That's a lot.
Or we can spare their eyes and leave it. Oh, you had it on the screen? No, that's actually probably better. Go ahead and go back on the screen. What am I
You
thinking?
can't really see the screen on here.
Yeah,
The words.
you had the right idea. So the body of the speech tells them what you want to tell them in detail at 75 to 85% of the total length. I'm going to have a problem like you indicated here earlier. I got a little stuffy and in my nose. I might have to clear before it's over. Okay, so that's the length. And then B, there's nothing. Notice here a couple things about this. Notice that A has nothing underneath it. I could put some things underneath it, but it depends on the length of your presentation and what's necessary. I didn't put it because I want to illustrate something. There's nothing else underneath it. I've determined that's all I want there. However, look at B. Breaks it down into all kinds of sub-points. So there's not like a required minimum number of points that you have. Well, there is, but it's not like you have to have things. Here's our minimum thing. The body will contain at least 2 main points, which will be one, a Roman numeral 1 or Roman numeral 2. It'll at least have that. Down lower, I'm going to tell you it won't have any more than 5. Then the same thing is true all the way through. If I've got an A and nothing underneath it, that's fine. But if I have an A and a 1, then I have to have a 2. And if I have a small a underneath the 1, then I got to have a small b. Otherwise, fold it into the previous sentence. And that'll become clear here. Same thing here. Look, we got 1. The main points will develop the central idea completely. The main points will answer obvious questions. The main points will contain only one idea each. The main points will end with a transition to the next main point. And then again, I divided it. Transitions promote clarity. Transitions emphasize important ideas. Transitions keep listeners interested. Transitions can refer to both the preceding and upcoming ideas. For instance, in a persuasive speech, that was the problem, now here's the solution. And then the audience knows we've moved from going over the problem to now we're talking about the solution. So again, I can't stop it here with A and have nothing else. Otherwise, I'd say the main points will end with a transition to the next main point and provide clarity. And then I'll stop. And there won't be anything under here. As it happens, I had other things I wanted to say about transitions, so I've got A, B, C, D. But again, don't leave a lonesome little A here, and don't leave a lonesome little 1 here, and don't leave a lonesome little A up here. If you have an A, you need a B. If you have a 1, you need a 2. Basic rule here. Okay, now that winds up being 1 page here because I've made a larger font for the purpose of the screen. When you do your outline, just do it like probably on a 12 font, and do it in a real clear font like Arial, not Times New Roman. It's got all the little hooks and things on it. It makes it a lot easier to read. So now we've got A and B up here. I move into the second page. Notice I've done this slavishly in this. The body keeps points parallel in construction whenever possible. Well, I overdid that in here just to give you the idea. At a certain level, notice an A and B, whoops, don't move that around like that. Notice on A and B, the body will amount, the body will contain. That makes it easier for the audience to follow. This is speaking, not written. If I write something and you get lost, you can go back and reread it. When I'm speaking, you got 1 shot at it, and I have to make it as plain as possible. That doesn't mean that all the way down, slavishly, you're going to be able to make it all sound so similar like I did here. And I had to work at it for a while to make it come out like that. But in general, the more you can keep them sounding somewhat alike, the easier it is for your audience to follow you. Very definitely make your main points sound very similar. So this is the body of the speech tells them, and it'll be the same thing you'll see when we get down to the introduction. And then you use the same tense. That's part of it being parallel. If it's a past tense you're operating in, keep it in the past tense. If it's in present, in a level. In a given level, like right in this level, keep it past or present or future tense throughout a level. That makes the framework more obvious, helps the audience follow you, and it helps you stay organized. And those rhythms too, like famous speakers get into, and they're restating things with the same words. It really drives the idea home. Now we're down to D, the body expands your main points through use of supporting materials. Supporting materials explain how it works and clarifies it, explains why they should believe you. They explain through a variety of types, so visual images, sound images, statistics, examples, some ideas that you have. The body contains, remember I said earlier, no more than 5 main points. And the reason for that is the audience cannot absorb more than 5 main points. We can really only handle about, even in dice, like up to the number 7 or whatever, we can just kind of recognize it. We're recognizing a 4 and a 3 and adding 7 in our head. Once you get past that, it's hard for people to recognize things at a glance. So, and the same thing is true of making a framework in their head. And the number of points can usually be reduced to 5 main points by combining some of them. So when we get into that and you're coming with 6 main points or 6 sub-points, usually I can help you find a way to make 2 of them work together. Or maybe you just have too many ideas in it in the first place. Now we have another transition. Now that the body's been written, you're ready to write the introduction. Because now we know what we're introducing, as Alexa said. The introduction of the speech briefly tells them what you're going to tell them. So now that's only 10 to 15% of the total length. You tell the audience why you're here. You want to accomplish 5 things. You want to catch their attention with an opening statement. Now here I've got some examples of how you can capture that attention. You can ask a question or make a startling statement. If you ask a question, then the audience is like, well, what is the answer to that? And they're into it. A startling statement, remember I gave you that example of you can't abuse alcohol? And everybody's heard of alcohol abuse. And, well, what? What's he talking about? I know, I've heard this for years. Well, you can't abuse alcohol. It's a beverage. It doesn't care what you do to it. But you can abuse yourself terribly. You abuse yourself terribly with alcohol. And then now you've pulled them into your presentation. You can refer to evidence. You can refer to the occasion. You can tell a joke. Speaking of referring to the occasion, sometimes you talked about the meteorite today. You might be given a presentation such that you could use that to pull them in. Again, everybody's been following something on the news or whatever. Sometimes there's something in the news that relates, and so, or it's the occasion that we're having here. You can tell a joke, but make sure the joke relates to your presentation. Don't just tell them some old farmer's daughter's joke and then talk about something else entirely. One of my classmates did that all the time. He always had a joke that went with it, and it works really well. And notice this other bullet point I got here. Make humor part of one of the above, if possible. And the reason I say to make humor part of it, if possible, is that 2 things about humor. One is it relaxes you if you can get the audience to laugh, and it pulls the audience in that way too. The other is, if somebody laughs, if it's a genuine laugh, they get it. You know they understand the point you're trying to make if you do it with humor, because they laugh and you say, oh, they understand what I'm trying to say here. So it helps to do that. And then here again, I've talked about this already up above. You want to tell the audience why they care. You want to set the tone for the speech. Is it real serious and somber? Is it lighthearted? Establish your credibility. We talked about that. And you want to introduce and preview the subject of the speech. And the introduction is written after the body's been worked out. Now, when you go to write your own deal, look at these things. You know, am I doing this as it's laid out here? And then we transition again. Finally, and this tells them it's a conclusion type of thing. Now, finally, you'll present the conclusion of the speech. So this tells them we're about done with main points here. The conclusion briefly tells them what you told them, and see how the conclusion briefly tells them what you told them. Sounds a lot like the introduction briefly tells them what you're going to tell them, and the body tells them what you want to tell them. So they sound similar. It helps the audience follow along. Here comes that sound again. So the conclusion reviews the speech, summarizes the speech, and the introduction tells them what you're going to tell them, the body tells them, and the conclusion tells them what you've told them. So you just summed up all this. D, the conclusion makes a closing statement, so again you're going to wind up with something firm. And you use the same theme as the opening statement, the big idea you started with. So maybe you started out with a little story, you know, little Sarah had this dread disease, whatever that might be, and so on. And then you kind of leave them hanging with that. At the end, thanks to the treatment that we talked about here earlier, Sarah is now a healthy 10-year-old girl running and playing with her playmates. So you bring that full circle around. Can you tie it back to that big idea? In a persuasive speech, you're going to appeal to action. Now, we can elect this candidate if we get out and vote. or you let your congressman know how you feel about this. Research has shown, by the way, that if you can get the audience to do something like that, they'll remain convinced longer than if they, I mean, they might leave here going, yeah, good idea, but if they don't take any action, it sort of just fades away. But if they'll even write a letter to their congressman or something, they have more of a tendency to stay convinced down the road. End with a challenge in a persuasive speech, you know, we can win if you do your part. And then end it after that closing statement. Just do it firmly. You want to end firmly and not trail off lamely like the following examples. And then you'll ask for questions. Look around the audience and say, you know, are there any questions? Now, this is going to be the confusing part. I just told you how to write a conclusion. That's not the conclusion of this speech. This is the only time that's going to be true, is in this particular speech, because it's about how to write a speech, including how to write the conclusion. I told you how to write the body. I told you how to write the introduction. I told you how to write the conclusion. But that isn't the conclusion. The conclusion of this speech is a review step. The introduction tells them what you're going to tell them, the body tells them, and the conclusion tells them what you have told them. So here's the actual conclusion of this speech. And then two, are there any questions? Because I didn't have anything else to put here. Now, every semester I get at least one person wanting to put a conclusion in the middle of their speech because they're following this stuff, right? You'll replace all this conclusion wording here after starting with this one, starting with right here, with something else. Video in your speech. Kindergarten in the 1960s did this or that, whatever, you know. Is that making sense? It's a mind shift. It's don't follow this down. Eliminate all the conclusion words that come at main point 3 here, because they're about writing a speech, and the speech has a conclusion to write about. In your own speech, you'll finish with the conclusion. That's the only place you'll have conclusion language. It's the only place you'll go. If you use that, you might use the word conclusion. Does that make sense? Be sure to ask questions if you have them, because I know this is confusing.
Yeah, it's confusing, but it's, you know, I can understand everything. Like I said, it's confusing, but it's comprehensive, you know.
Okay. Comprehensible?
Comprehensible, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And if you have any other questions and you want to ask me later or whatever, or you get to write your speech, you know, remember there's no conclusion in the body, only in the conclusion.
Okay.
And this conclusion stuff here is about writing a conclusion, how to write a conclusion. It's not the conclusion, it's just about how to write a conclusion. And you won't have to do that in your speech, whatever your informative topic might be about. One other thing about this basic format, I've got 3 main points here. You can have up to 5. Try to keep the amount somewhere in the neighborhood similar, but probably your first main point is going to have a tendency to have a little bit more information than your second and third ones. And you don't always use 4 and 5 main points either. Depends on the topic and what you need to do. Something else along those lines. Escaping me for the moment here. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The persuasive speech will only have 2 main points. Point number 1 is the what's point number 1 in a persuasive speech?
Well, there's a problem.
What's the problem? Point number 2 is
The solution.
the solution. Right. So that's all you're going to have in a persuasive is a problem and a solution. And it's going to be a policy speech. You know, we should do this or we should not do this, whatever that might be. And there'll be a problem. We're going to clearly lay out the problem and clearly lay out the solution. The preview step will just mash those 2 main points together, perhaps simplify it a little bit. And in the preview, you'll say, you know, because South Dakota is so big and hard to get from place to place and takes a lot of time, the speed limit, you know, 55 is too slow. The solution is that, you know, we raise the speed limit up to whatever. So Okay, any other questions about how this is? I sent you a sample. Take and plug your information, or if it's boldface, leave it just like it is. If it's not boldface, then change it to fit your stuff, whatever. And then you won't have to. Oh, here's something else I just kind of realized recently. When you go to type your own things in, let's say that up here in A, you do have some things that you want to put underneath it, and you're having trouble making the formatting stay the way it's supposed to be. You can come down here and put in an X, and then you can go down here and put in an X. I think is how I figured that out. And then copy not the X. I should leave a space there. It's a lot easier to copy if you don't have this. If you have that space there, don't copy the X's. Just copy the words. Now when I do this, see how it gives a B automatically? But if I tab in, that should give me a 1. And then I come here and copy that in. It'll keep it out here. It won't take it back out there. You'll still have to go up here on the ruler line and move over here like this. There's still something missing here. I got to play with that again. Well, that's where it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be right below there. That 1 is. I guess that's okay. I need to move this over here, actually, and this. I asked the computer person here one time at Capital University what how to handle something with an outline in Word. She says, it's just difficult. So I'll work on this some more and get this figured out again. I had it figured out before. But anyway, those are the big ideas about that. I see we're rapidly approaching break time here. So let's wrap this part of it. Any other questions? Okay. Well, let's wrap on the video then and
Okay.
take a break.
Good.